Leaders Eat Last. Why Some Teams Pull Together and Others Don't. Written by Simon Sinek, summarized by detailed book summaries. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Chapter 1. Our Need to Feel Safe. Simon Sinek begins Leaders Eat Last by taking us back to the roots of human survival, emphasizing that the foundation of strong teams and great leadership lies in our deep, evolutionary need to feel safe. Our ancestors lived in harsh and dangerous environments where survival depended not only on individual strength, but on the security and trust found within their tribes. Those who felt safe and protected by their group thrived, while those who simply didn't survive. This primal need for safety is hardwired into our brains. When we feel threatened or stressed, our bodies release cortisol, the stress hormone, which narrows our focus to immediate survival and creates tension, distrust, and fear. But when we feel safe, our brains produce oxytocin, known as the bonding hormone, which encourages connection, collaboration, and openness. This biological response explains why feeling safe in a team is crucial for trust and cooperation to flourish. Sinek highlights that many modern workplaces unintentionally recreate unsafe environments. Instead of fostering trust, these workplaces breed stress, competition, and disengagement. Employees hide mistakes, hesitate to take risks, and operate from a place of fear rather than enthusiasm. This toxic cycle stifles creativity, lowers morale, and ultimately damages performance. The antidote, Sinek explains, is what he calls the circle of safety. Great leaders build and protect this circle by prioritizing the emotional and social safety of their people. This isn't about physical protection alone, but about creating a culture where people feel valued, supported, and secure enough to bring their best selves to work every day. The book's title, Leaders Eat Last, comes from a powerful military metaphor where leaders eat only after their troops have been served. This simple act embodies the essence of leadership as an act of service and sacrifice. When leaders put their people first, the people in turn feel safe, trusted, and motivated to give their best, their loyalty, creativity, and energy. Chapter 1 sets the stage by showing us that leadership is less about authority and control, and more about building trust through creating safety. It's about understanding the human brain and how environments shape behavior. This foundation paves the way for deeper exploration in the following chapters on how leaders can nurture this culture of safety, and why it is so essential to team success. Chapter 2. The Circle of Safety. Building on the foundation of safety introduced in Chapter 1, Simon Sinek delves deeper into the concept of the circle of safety, the invisible boundary that leaders must create and protect to ensure their team feels secure. This circle isn't just about keeping external threats at bay. It's about cultivating an environment where trust and cooperation thrive inside the organization. Sinek explains that in a well-functioning organization, the circle of safety acts like a protective shield, encouraging people to focus their energy outward, toward customers, competitors, and the challenges of the marketplace, rather than inward, toward office politics, backstabbing, or self-preservation. When people feel safe within this circle, they stop worrying about their own survival and start contributing boldly and authentically to the team's success. But why is this so difficult to achieve? The answer lies in how modern organizations are often structured and managed. Many workplaces operate under constant pressure to meet short-term goals, which leads leaders and employees alike to compete internally for scarce resources, recognition, and promotion. This undermines the sense of safety and triggers the brain's stress response, flooding individuals with cortisol and pushing them into fight-or-flight mode. Sinek points out that the natural human response to feeling unsafe is self-protection. People start looking out for themselves first, which erodes trust and fractures teams. When this happens, the organization's energy is drained from within, and the ability to innovate, collaborate, and perform at a high level diminishes. The key to reversing this toxic cycle lies with leadership. True leaders extend the circle of safety beyond their closest circle and expand it to include everyone in the organization. They commit to the welfare of their people, build a culture of belonging, and make clear that no one will be left behind or sacrificed for short-term gains. Sinek shares powerful examples from the military, where the concept of the circle of safety is lived out daily. Soldiers protect one another, knowing that their leaders have their backs. This culture creates deep loyalty, commitment, and willingness to endure hardships together, Lessons that translate directly to business and life. The chapter closes with a challenge to leaders everywhere. Assess whether your team feels safe enough to take risks, admit mistakes, and trust one another. Because without a strong circle of safety, people retreat into survival mode, and leadership becomes a constant struggle rather than a source of strength. Chapter 3, Reality and the Brain. In Chapter 3, Simon Sinek dives into the biology that underpins human behavior in organizations, revealing how our brains are wired to respond to both threats and opportunities. He explains that understanding this neurological foundation is essential for leaders who want to create environments where people thrive, rather than just survive. At the heart of this chapter is the role of chemicals in our brain, specifically dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, and cortisol, that govern how we feel motivated, connected, or stressed. Dopamine, often called the reward chemical, drives us to achieve goals by providing bursts of pleasure and satisfaction when we accomplish something meaningful. Serotonin boosts our feelings of pride and status within a group, making us want to protect and lead those around us. Oxytocin, famously dubbed the bonding hormone, fosters trust and connection, enabling us to form deep social bonds crucial for teamwork. But there's a flip side. Cortisol, the stress hormone, is triggered when we feel threatened or unsafe, putting us on high alert and prioritizing self-preservation. When cortisol dominates, collaboration and creativity suffer, because people become focused on protecting themselves. Sinek highlights a key insight. Leaders have the power to influence which of these chemicals dominate within their teams. By fostering environments that release serotonin and oxytocin, through recognition, empathy, and building genuine relationships, they can reduce cortisol levels, easing stress and promoting cooperation. He also cautions that the modern workplace often unintentionally activates cortisol. Pressures like job insecurity, office politics, and lack of trust create chronic stress that erodes morale and productivity. Leaders who ignore this biological reality risk creating toxic cultures where employees disengage and turnover rises. What sets exceptional leaders apart is their ability to put people first, understanding that leadership is not about authority or control, but about creating conditions where the brain's chemistry supports safety, belonging, and motivation. Sinek emphasizes that leadership is fundamentally about serving others, a mindset shift from command and control to care and protection. The chapter wraps with a compelling reminder that biology is destiny, unless leaders choose to rewrite the environment. By appreciating how our brains function, leaders can consciously design workplaces that nurture the chemicals that bind people together and drive collective success. Chapter 4. This is your brain on chemicals. Chapter 4 takes us deeper into the chemistry of the brain and how it shapes the behaviors we see in the workplace. Simon Sinek zooms in on the powerful role of 4 key chemicals: dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, and cortisol, and how they influence everything from motivation to trust, cooperation to stress. Dopamine kicks off the show. It's that addictive rush we get when we accomplish a goal or receive recognition. Dopamine drives ambition, pushing us to chase bigger targets and celebrate small wins. But it's also a double-edged sword. It can make us impatient, focused on the next reward before appreciating what we've done. Serotonin steps in as the social status chemical. When we feel respected or valued by others, serotonin floods our brain, giving us a sense of pride and belonging. This chemical fuels leadership and loyalty because we crave status within our groups. Oxytocin is the glue of relationships. Released during moments of trust, empathy, and kindness, oxytocin helps us bond deeply with others, reducing fear and increasing cooperation. Sinek points out that oxytocin is what makes us willing to sacrifice for our team. It's the biological foundation of leadership as service. On the other hand, cortisol, the stress hormone, raises alarms when we feel threatened. It sharpens focus in emergencies but becomes harmful when chronically elevated. High cortisol kills creativity, trust, and long-term thinking, turning teams into fearful defensive groups. Sinek highlights how these chemicals constantly interact, shaping the culture of an organization. Great leaders understand this interplay and work to maximize dopamine, serotonin, and oxytocin while minimizing cortisol. They celebrate achievements, build trust, and create safe environments where people feel secure enough to innovate and collaborate. The chapter warns against workplaces that rely too heavily on dopamine-driven incentives like bonuses or promotions without nurturing deeper connections. Such environments may spur short-term wins but fail to build lasting loyalty or engagement. Ultimately, Chapter 4 reinforces that leadership is biological. To be a great leader, you must design your culture around these chemicals. Fuel ambition with dopamine, build trust with oxytocin, nurture respect with serotonin, and protect people from cortisol's damage. This is how you create teams that don't just work together but pull together. Chapter 5, The Big C. In Chapter 5, Simon Sinek dives into one of the most critical yet destructive chemicals affecting us all, cortisol, the stress hormone, what he calls the Big C. This chapter unpacks how cortisol shapes our behavior, impacts team dynamics, and why managing it is essential for leaders who want to build thriving organizations. Cortisol is your body's alarm system. It spikes when you sense danger, whether it's a physical threat or a looming deadline, conflict with a coworker, or fear of failure. In short bursts, cortisol is a lifesaver, sharpening your focus, boosting your energy, and prepping you to handle immediate challenges. But when stress becomes constant and cortisol levels remain elevated, the consequences turn toxic. Sinek explains how chronic cortisol exposure rewires the brain, increasing anxiety and suspicion. It causes people to look out only for themselves, breaking down trust and cooperation. The us versus them mentality grows, and fear takes hold, turning workplaces into battlegrounds where individuals protect their own interests at the expense of the collective. This is the opposite of what great teams need. High cortisol environments kill creativity, collaboration, and loyalty. When employees feel stressed all the time, they aren't working toward shared goals, they're trying to survive. Their energy drains away, and morale crumbles. Sinek illustrates this with real-world examples where toxic workplaces led to burnout, high turnover, and disengagement. He contrasts this with organizations where leaders intentionally reduce stress by creating psychological safety, environments where people feel safe to take risks, admit mistakes, and trust one another. The chapter drives home that leadership isn't just about driving results. It's about protecting your people from unnecessary stress. Leaders who understand cortisol's effects take steps to reduce fear by fostering empathy, clear communication, and support systems. This builds a foundation where cortisol levels normalize, allowing dopamine, serotonin, and oxytocin to thrive and fuel positive teamwork. Ultimately, Chapter 5 challenges us to recognize the corrosive impact of stress on ourselves and others. It calls leaders to create environments where people feel safe, valued, and connected, because only then can real, lasting success take root. Chapter 6. How to Have a Good Day. In Chapter 6, Simon Sinek explores the daily rhythms of our brain chemistry and how the right balance of chemicals, dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, and yes, even cortisol, can make a huge difference in how we experience work and leadership. Sinek opens by explaining that our bodies are wired to seek small, consistent rewards. Dopamine, the brain's feel-good chemical, is released in response to achievements and milestones, whether it's closing a deal, solving a problem, or simply ticking off a task. This motivates us, pushing us to chase more success. But dopamine alone isn't enough to create meaningful satisfaction or lasting happiness. That's where serotonin and oxytocin come in, chemicals associated with social connection, pride, and trust. Serotonin rewards us when we feel respected and recognized by others. Oxytocin, often called the love hormone, floods our systems when we build strong bonds, cooperate, or help someone else. Together, these chemicals create a sense of belonging and purpose, making our work feel worthwhile. However, Sinek warns about the dangers of a dopamine-driven culture that prioritizes short-term wins at all costs. When leaders push only for results, ignoring relationships and trust, people become transactional, chasing rewards while feeling isolated and burned out. The chapter offers practical advice on how leaders can foster an environment where these positive chemicals flow freely. It starts with celebrating small victories publicly to boost dopamine. Next, leaders must build a culture of respect and recognition to elevate serotonin. Most importantly, they must prioritize empathy and genuine connection to unleash oxytocin. Sinek emphasizes that while some stress cortisol, is unavoidable and even helpful. The goal is to ensure it doesn't overwhelm the system. A good day happens when people feel safe, valued, and energized, not just pressured to perform. This chapter is a call to leaders to design their team's days intentionally, balancing the brain's chemical cocktail to fuel motivation, connection, and well-being. When done right, it transforms ordinary workdays into moments where people feel truly alive and driven by more than just the next paycheck or deadline. Chapter 7, The Big C. In Chapter 7, Simon Sinek dives deep into the often overlooked but critical role of cortisol, the body's stress hormone, and how it shapes the culture and performance of teams. While dopamine, serotonin, and oxytocin bring motivation, pride, and connection, cortisol serves as the body's alarm system, designed to protect us from danger but also capable of wreaking havoc when it runs unchecked. Sinek explains that cortisol is vital in short bursts. It sharpens focus, prepares us for action, and helps us deal with immediate threats. But chronic stress leads to sustained high cortisol levels, which can damage health, erode trust, and destroy team cohesion. When people operate under constant stress, the workplace becomes a survival zone, where fear dominates and collaboration breaks down. This chapter highlights how toxic environments, where leaders rely on fear, micromanagement, or unrealistic demands, create cortisol overload. Employees become hyper-alert and anxious, which stifles creativity, kills morale, and leads to burnout. The result? Teams fracture, turnover spikes, and productivity plummets. Sinek calls this the circle of safety breaking down, the fundamental sense of security that allows people to take risks and innovate. Without safety, cortisol controls behavior, pushing people toward self-preservation rather than collective success. Importantly, the chapter emphasizes that leaders are responsible for managing this stress dynamic. By fostering trust, clear communication, and consistent support, leaders can reduce unnecessary cortisol triggers. They create spaces where people feel safe to speak up, make mistakes, and lean on each other. The big C, cortisol, might seem like the enemy, but when understood and managed, it's just part of the body's natural response system. The challenge is balancing stress to avoid toxicity and instead promote resilience. Chapter 7 offers a powerful lesson. Great leaders don't just push for results. They protect their people from the corrosive effects of chronic stress. This protection is foundational for sustainable success in teams that truly pull together. Chapter 8, The Courage to Do the Right Thing. Chapter 8 explores one of the most defining qualities of exceptional leadership: courage. Simon Sinek points out that true leaders are not just those who hold authority, but those who have the courage to do what's right, even when it's difficult or unpopular. This chapter unpacks how courage is deeply tied to trust and safety within an organization. When leaders create environments where people feel secure, those individuals are more willing to take risks, speak up, and innovate. But courage isn't just about big, heroic acts. It's often found in small, consistent choices. Admitting mistakes, giving honest feedback, standing up for a team member, or saying no to pressure that compromises integrity. Sinek stresses that courage is contagious. When leaders demonstrate vulnerability and integrity, they inspire others to do the same. This ripple effect builds a culture where people support each other and push through challenges collectively. But courage also means confronting the uncomfortable realities, the problems and conflicts that others might avoid. It requires leaders to face their fears and insecurities, moving beyond self-interest for the greater good of the team. The chapter includes examples of leaders who chose courage over convenience and how their actions transformed their organizations. These stories reinforce that leadership is less about position and more about character, and the willingness to protect and empower others. Ultimately, Chapter 8 reminds us that courage isn't a trait reserved for a few. It's a skill that can be cultivated through trust, empathy, and commitment to shared values. Leaders who embrace courage foster teams that are not only stronger, but also more united and resilient. Chapter 9, The Abstract Challenge. Chapter 9 delves into the complex nature of leadership in today's fast-changing, technology-driven world, where challenges are often abstract, intangible, and difficult to grasp. Simon Sinek explains that unlike traditional leadership challenges, which were often concrete and visible, modern leaders face problems that are more subtle. Shifting societal expectations, remote work dynamics, cultural changes, and the constant barrage of information that can overwhelm teams. This abstract nature makes it harder for leaders to create the clear circle of safety that Sinek has emphasized throughout the book. When problems feel invisible or distant, trust can erode, and stress can mount without obvious causes. The disconnection can lead to disengagement, confusion, and a lack of cohesion. Sinek stresses the importance of leaders cultivating emotional intelligence and awareness to recognize these hidden stressors before they spiral out of control. They must listen actively, communicate transparently, and foster connection in environments that can often feel isolating. The chapter also highlights how technology both helps and hinders leadership. While it enables faster communication and data sharing, it can also create noise, reduce face-to-face interaction, and blur boundaries between work and life, all contributing to stress and burnout. Ultimately, Chapter 9 challenges leaders to adapt by embracing empathy and intentionality in their leadership style. They must become translators of complexity, helping their teams make sense of ambiguity and find shared purpose amid uncertainty. In a world where challenges are increasingly abstract, the role of the leader as protector and connector has never been more vital. Chapter 10, Managing Anxiety. Chapter 10 tackles one of the most pervasive and invisible forces undermining workplace culture and team cohesion: anxiety. Simon Sinek highlights how modern work environments, with their relentless pace and constant pressure, can create a pervasive sense of unease that saps energy and erodes trust. Anxiety arises when people feel uncertain about their safety, status, or future in an organization. It triggers a fight-or-flight response that narrows focus and limits creativity, making collaboration and innovation much harder. Sinek explains that when anxiety dominates, people stop thinking long-term and focus solely on immediate survival. The chapter explores how leaders can recognize the signs of anxiety in their teams, disengagement, increased conflict, or burnout, and take proactive steps to reduce it. The antidote to anxiety is, again, the circle of safety, creating a culture where people feel valued, protected, and supported. Sinek emphasizes that managing anxiety isn't about controlling or suppressing stress, but about creating trust through consistent leadership behaviors, honest communication, empathy, and prioritizing people over short-term results. He also discusses how leaders must be mindful of their own anxiety and how it can unknowingly trickle down and affect the entire organization. Leaders who model calm, confidence, and emotional resilience help create a steady environment where people feel secure. The chapter closes by reinforcing that managing anxiety isn't a one-time fix but a continuous process, a fundamental leadership responsibility that directly impacts team health, engagement, and performance. Chapter 11, The Courage to Do the Right Thing. Chapter 11 centers on a critical, but often overlooked quality in leadership: courage. Simon Sinek argues that true leadership isn't just about strategy or vision. It's about having the courage to make difficult decisions that protect and serve your team, even when those choices are unpopular or risky. Sinek points out that leaders who prioritize their own success, or the bottom line over the well-being of their people, erode trust and loyalty. Courageous leaders, in contrast, step up to take responsibility, confront problems head-on, and make sacrifices for the greater good. The chapter highlights stories of leaders who have demonstrated this kind of courage, standing up to unfair practices, defending their teams, or making ethical decisions under pressure. These leaders earn lasting respect and foster deep commitment. Sinek also emphasizes that courage isn't an innate trait, but a habit that can be cultivated. It requires self-awareness, a clear sense of purpose, and a willingness to be vulnerable. Being courageous means saying no when necessary, admitting mistakes, and being transparent. In today's complex and rapidly changing world, the courage to do the right thing, even when it's difficult, is what separates good leaders from great ones. It builds a culture where people feel safe, valued, and inspired to give their best. Ultimately, Chapter 11 drives home the message that courage in leadership isn't optional. It's essential for creating environments where teams pull together, innovate, and thrive. Chapter 13, The Courage to Lead. In the final chapter, Simon Sinek returns to the theme of courage, underscoring it as the defining quality of truly impactful leaders. He emphasizes that leadership isn't about rank, titles, or authority. It's about the willingness to put others first, to be vulnerable, and to take responsibility for the well-being of the team. Sinek reflects on how difficult it can be to lead with empathy and integrity in environments driven by competition, fear, and short-term pressures. Yet, he insists that the courage to be authentic and to prioritize people over profits is what creates lasting success and loyalty. This chapter explores the personal costs and rewards of courageous leadership. It acknowledges that standing up for what is right often means facing criticism, resistance, or personal sacrifice. However, the payoff is profound, building a culture of trust, safety, and cooperation where people are inspired to give their best every day. Sinek calls leaders to embrace vulnerability as a strength, the willingness to admit mistakes, ask for help, and show empathy. He argues that this vulnerability creates deeper connections and stronger teams. The chapter closes with a call to action, to lead with courage, to create a circle of safety where everyone can thrive, and to remember that leadership is a responsibility and a privilege. When leaders eat last, everyone wins. Chapter 14. The circle of safety expands. In Chapter 14, Simon Sinek explores how the circle of safety, the environment of trust and cooperation within an organization, can grow beyond the immediate team or company to include entire communities, industries, and even societies. He explains that the principles of leadership that create safe, supportive cultures at work have the power to influence broader social systems when applied thoughtfully. Sinek points out that as leaders expand their circle of safety, they must navigate greater complexity, competing interests, and larger-scale challenges. But the core idea remains the same. When people feel protected and valued, they can collaborate more effectively, innovate more boldly, and contribute more meaningfully. The chapter also highlights examples of organizations and movements that have successfully broadened their impact by prioritizing empathy, trust, and shared purpose. Sinek stresses that leaders who think beyond their own teams and embrace a wider sense of responsibility help build stronger, more resilient ecosystems. Ultimately, Chapter 14 calls leaders to imagine their influence not just within their organizations, but as catalysts for positive change in the world, reinforcing that leadership rooted in care and courage has the power to transform lives far beyond the workplace. Chapter 15. Leadership is a choice. In the closing chapter, Simon Sinek drives home a powerful message. Leadership is not a position or a title. It's a choice each person makes every day. It's the decision to put others before yourself, to take responsibility for the welfare of your team, and to act with integrity even when it's difficult. Sinek reminds us that anyone can be a leader, regardless of their rank or role. The true measure of leadership lies in the willingness to serve, to create a culture where people feel safe, valued, and inspired to give their best. This choice requires courage, humility, and a commitment to the long-term health of the group. He stresses that leadership is about action, small, consistent acts of care and bravery that build trust over time. It's about showing up for others, protecting them from harm, and fostering an environment where collaboration and innovation flourish. The chapter closes with a call for leaders to embrace this responsibility wholeheartedly. By choosing to lead with empathy and courage, we not only elevate those around us but also create a ripple effect that transforms organizations, communities, and ultimately, society. Leadership is a choice, and it starts with you.